Stay Away from the Streetlights by DiceIV. If you live in New Mexico, please stay out of the streetlight. Look, I don't know how to explain this. I don't know if it's just my area, or if this is happening everywhere. I don't know if others really see them or not. But if you do not go near them. They're not who you think they are. Do not try to wave or talk to them. They're not friendly. Do not look at them because I don't think they're even human, at least not entirely. And for the love of your own life, stay away from the streetlights. To begin with, I live in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico. For a few reasons, I won't say exactly where. Mainly because this is the internet, but also because I'm afraid there's something going on here that I just don't understand. Which wouldn't surprise me because, well, it's New Mexico. And because it's an out-of-touch, weird little town. Naturally, like any small town, it's had lots of weird happenings. But nothing newsworthy. In fact, most of the worst here doesn't even wind up on the evening news. All in all, it's a quaint and quiet little town. That's not to say that it's not without its drawbacks. There are tweakers, car thieves, missing persons. In fact, one of my best friends went missing out here. But that's not what this is about. Not really. You see, this all started when my rundown little suburbs finally got its streetlights fixed. Honestly, I can't remember what happened to take them out of commission in the first place. For quite some time, and I mean like an insane amount of time even for my area's energy and city workers, the lights were down. I remember thinking how I hated how dark it was without those streetlights, how dangerous it could be for walkers, how vulnerable and alone the night could make someone. Now I find myself missing the blanket of dark that came with the desert nights. Anyway, as soon as the streetlights came back up, I noticed something strange. Not like stereotypical Roswell strange. Mostly just standout strange. It was on my own way home from work one night, the first time that I saw one. The kitchen I work at took a bit too long to close, so it was around 1 a.m. The streetlights had been up for maybe 2 days, and ordinarily someone walking along beneath them is nothing to take note of. This wasn't just some soul on a standard late-night stroll, though. No, this person was hunched over, visibly tense. Even from a passing car's glance, she held her arms as if she were cradling or hugging herself. Even more strange was her hair and her clothes. She looked so clean, like her hair was wet and combed. In fact, all of her looked soaked, and she was visibly spotless. All she wore was just a gray sweater and those workout pants you see so much. And then there was the way that she walked, back and forth in a total lack of pattern, all while staring up at the streetlight. She didn't even give me a passing glance. She looked like she was lost under the light. Naturally, I thought she was a meth head. I'm no stranger to my state, after all. I mean, they did do a whole show about it. But then I thought, since when are meth heads that clean? Since when do they look so spick and span? Unless someone was taking it upon themselves to literally clean the local amphetamine abusers, which would make for an odd charity. This freaked me out, but I wasn't necessarily terrified. Not yet, at least. It wasn't until I told my friends about it that I started getting a bigger picture. One of the few friends I still know from my days in school reminded me that he had a relatable experience. Years back, when I was still in high school, a good friend told me that he'd seen something similar. For a couple of the aforementioned reasons, we'll avoid his real name and we'll call him Sean. Sean said that he looked like some average dude, that he just sort of walked around under the light. It sounded similar, aside from the fact that he wasn't weirdly neat. I asked if he was noticeably clean, and Sean responded with something like, "I can't be sure, dude. It sort of rings a bell, but I just can't remember, honestly." He'd followed with an earnest shrug, and we dropped the conversation for a little while. However, he reminded me of another detail, one that didn't match up with what I saw. He said after he watched this guy from the blinds for a long time, like almost an hour, this guy started watching back. Maybe it was different, I thought. After all, the girl didn't even notice me. But that's not what really makes me suspicious. A little shook up and naturally paranoid from all of the smoking a small-town kid does, Sean went and woke up his old man, asking if he should get out one of the guns. And weirdly enough, his dad just mumbled, "Go to bed, they're none of our business." This was what caught my attention. I'd known this guy's dad for a few years, ever since they'd moved here, and that did not sound like how he'd respond to something like that. He was usually a pretty paranoid guy and normally would have taken a look himself. But nope, not this time. This time, he's absolutely apathetic. I asked my parents if near their place they'd seen anything similar. No luck though. They both get up and go to bed too early to have seen anything. I asked a coworker if she'd seen anything, and she seemed totally oblivious. Even weirder, another coworker basically dismissed the conversation, which was weird because the guy was usually down to talk about anything. And I mean anything. He was the kind of guy who'd claim he knew how to make explosives from any household chemicals. He read way too much stuff online. He was perfect for passing the time with conversation. It was strange. I'd basically asked, "Hey man, have you been seeing tweakers around at night lately?" "What, here?" "Nah, never," he'd said sarcastically. After I'd given him a look that said semi-serious, he'd sobered up his response. "I don't think there's been any near the restaurant, at least. The boss man does a good job of keeping them away from here." I cut him off. "No, dude, I mean like wandering around, hanging out under the streetlights. I even saw some chick just staring up at one the other night." He immediately clammed up. His back went stiff and straight, which was abnormal for a guy like him. He'd worked kitchens for 20 plus years. He didn't have pristine posture, so to speak. He responded quickly. "Oh, that's pretty weird. Probably nothing though. You know how them teeth grinders be." "Yeah," I responded in a dragged out manner. But this girl just looked so out there. I mean, you should have... This time he cut me off. I wouldn't put too much thought into it. And with that, he turned around to face the grill line. He said, "Junkies are just funny sometimes. They do weird things like wander around under streetlights, looking like they just crawled out of Crystal Lake." He chuckled to himself, and I nervously chuckled back. I didn't say anything, and maybe he didn't notice. Maybe I shouldn't have noticed either. Maybe I put too much attention into tiny details or speculate on minor trivialities. It could have honestly been a coincidence, and it probably was. But I didn't say that she looked wet. I was going to, but he had interrupted me before I could. So how did he know? Did he know? Was he pretending not to know or not to have seen them? And was I supposed to pretend not to as well? Suddenly, I realized that I'd spent far too much time in thought, and I just muttered, Yeah, good point, and I went back to my work. It was all I could think about for the rest of my shift. It had been a few nights since I'd seen someone under the streetlights anyway, but that night on my way home, the thoughts tore away at my mind, like a dog starved and tearing away at a bag of unopened puppy chow. Everything just within reach, kept from me by a simple layer of something that I couldn't quite understand. All that I knew was that it could be torn at, clawed and toothed towards, till it yielded its insides. And that's what I'd do. I'd claw at this until I understood it. So I swung by a gas station and I filled up my car. I grabbed a night coffee and texted my roommates that I'd be coming in late. Then off I went for a bag of dog food to tear into. That is, I drove around all night looking for people under the streetlights, like a total loon. And of course, it was to no avail. This stuff doesn't get chased down. I mean, who did I think I was? Zach Baggins all of a sudden? This went on for almost a week. Anytime that I'd find myself driving at night, I'd stay vigilant, scanning the streetlights for anyone that just so much as seemed similar to the girl from before. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I had just temporarily lost my mind one evening in particular, or if I was still in the process, or perhaps it had already happened and I hadn't noticed. I was clearly a little too transfixed on the whole thing. But you know, this turned out to be a lot like that time you lost the remote. You know the one. That time when you finally gave up and stopped looking, but then it suddenly dropped into your lap. Yeah, it was a lot like that. To make it clear, this wasn't one of those serendipitous turns of fate, where I just suddenly found someone or something because I was in the right place at the right time. This was more like bad luck leading to even worse luck. So, one night I'm on my way home, watching the streetlights as my most recent bad habit dictates. Not a thing to be seen. Not at first, at least. Suddenly, the silhouette of something registers to me. Something outside of the car, along the ground, and moving fast. I instinctively slam on brakes. My neighborhood has tons of cats and dogs running around, and as a result, I've gotten used to avoiding running over little Susie's kitten. And sure enough, it's just that. Some neighborhood cat running along in the dead of night, trying to test its mettle against the great steel beast that roar down the streets of its home. I don't know why cats do that, but I hate them for it. It used to be because it's a minor heart attack waiting to happen, but now it's because it made me stop and see exactly what I was searching for. And I wish it hadn't. I wish I just ran that cat over and went along my merry way. There it was, another one. Another light pole soul. That's what I'd been calling them. I don't know why, it just felt fitting. My eyes are poor and I was missing my glasses, but I knew what I was seeing right when I saw it. This one was a man. He looked clean, kind of wet actually, or at least his hair. His arms were wrapped around himself. He wandered around within the light, staring up into its source. I don't know how long I watched him for. I just sat there in my car, in the middle of the road, with my jaw between my feet and the pedals. Then he turned and he looked right at me. I wish I could say that he looked through me, but no. This was the sort of stare that comes with an impact. A glance you can physically feel. It felt cold, like I couldn't breathe, as if I was being smothered. Then there was his arms. They uncrossed and stretched out, as if he was reaching out to embrace me. However, I was in my car, and pretty far from him. What was he doing? That's all that ran through my mind. Before I knew it, my foot was on the accelerator. I didn't have far to go until I was home. Not even a minute's drive, but every instinct in me screamed to get home as soon as possible, to put that thing behind me. So that's what I did. And as I did just that, as I sped by this man, I saw his face, and I nearly wrecked my car, both from trying to get a better look and from the shock of the sight. I hadn't seen him in years, but he didn't look too different not to recognize. Remember that friend that I said went missing? His name's Colt. And that was him. At least I'm pretty sure it is. I hope it isn't. Oh God, I do hope that. But I can feel it. I feel that it's Colt. I don't know what's going on. And I don't know who to tell, or if I can tell anyone. I don't even know if it's real. Maybe I've just flown over the cuckoo's nest. But I do know those things come at night. I know they're obsessed with light. And I know they don't notice you until you notice them. And I know they're stuck in the streetlights. How do I know that? Because every now and then, outside my home at night, I see Colt, trapped beneath the streetlight. I think he wants me to join him, but I can tell that that's the trick. The trap. So please, if you're anywhere in New Mexico, or you think you see one, just stay away. Stay away from the streetlights.